Welcome. Thank you for joining our special anniversary webinar. This is Kathy Isles. I'm the coordinator at the Australian Seed Bank Partnership, and I'm here with Erin Kirsch. If you can put your camera on, Erin, who's helping me out while Brad is on leave. Now, I just want to actually put out a special recognition to Brad. He has put in an awesome superhuman effort on the anniversary and the campaign that is running with it. Hopefully you've all been following his amazing social media stories. He appears in a couple of videos, including the one that will go out today, which is a very, thanks Gemma, a very awesome video of all our partners doing a shout out for the anniversary. I also want to recognise while I'm here a few of the key people that have been part of the partnership over the last period of time. The original coordinator of the ASBP, Lucy Sutherland, followed by Damien Wrigley. I'm hoping Damien may be online. And before the ASBP was set up, Tom North coordinated the AUSCAR network. So, just wanted to recognise everyone that's been a key part of this organisation. And of course, our council. There's too many people to mention there. Now, we may have time for a few questions. So Erin will activate the Q&A. Put your questions in the Q&A and not the chat, and we'll see how we go time-wise, because I'm really wanting you to hear the stories from our partners. That's the most important part of today. And if we don't get to your questions and you've got specific questions for anyone online or about the partnership, we'll respond to those offline. Okay, now to open, I actually want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of this unceded land, Canberra, where Erin and I, Gemma and Annalisa are meeting. I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. I want to extend that respect to all First Nations people as the traditional owners and custodians of this country, and particularly honour their cultural and spiritual connection, their continuing care and deep knowledge of country, especially in relation to what we're all interested in, which is native plants. I want to further acknowledge any traditional owners and First Nations people that are joining us here today. Now, this next couple of slides, including the one that's on show at the moment, just show a few of the projects where we've been really privileged to be able to work on country with the traditional owners. And these are from Uluru, so this is some of the National Seed Bank's work. And then once again, we have the Marla Ranges down at Buderi National Park up in the corner. We've got rangers that have been working on some of the projects in Western Australia, and the guys from Raku Nursery, you would recognise them, Dan, that have been involved in propagating and threatened species conservation. They look pretty excited, those guys, don't they? Cool dudes. Okay, let's move on to our webinar. And why does plant conservation matter? Now, I've stolen this with Rachel's permission, statement from Rachel Gallagher, who's one of our kind of preeminent plant ecologists. She sits on the Threatened Species Scientific Committee. She led a lot of the post-bushfire work to identify those priority species. Rachel's words sum up our flora. It's locally precious and globally significant. We've got over 24,000 native species and still counting. Let's compare that to the UK, where they've got around 1,600 species. So, I mean, that gives you some context. Now, this is the really important stat that I want you to keep in your minds. 88% of our plants occur nowhere else. We've got amazing endemisms. We're mega diverse. That accounts for 8% of global plant species richness. Now, the other side of that story is we know that our plants are in trouble. 10% are listed as threatened. They're by far the largest cohort of our threatened, but that 10% is only a small percentage of plants that may be at risk. So, why do we seed bank? Why do we do what we do? The stats above show that we actually need to be protecting plants in their wild habitats, but also doing what we call ex situ conservation, which is conserving them outside of their habitats. And that's where seed banking comes in. Now, seed banking is a key strategy to prevent extinction. It's an insurance policy safeguarding our plants against their loss and also declines in the wild. Now, for those that aren't familiar with seed banking, this is a bit of a very basic, simple 101 given to you by a social scientist, by the way. Our seeds are collected and stored in very dry and cold vaults. This is PlantBank. So Nathan's online. He's the collector manager and curator of their amazing seed vault. Any of you Canberra-based people that are online, if you're ever going to Sydney, you have no excuses not to call in and see this most amazing facility. It is an exquisite piece of architecture. It's a beautiful space, and it has amazing capacity to do a whole lot of work, including more broadly in terms of the work we do across the nation. So once our seeds are stored in this amazing vault, we're looking at this one at PlantBank, the conditions that they're stored under means that they can be kept there basically until they need to be used. So this is also the most practical and effective way to actually secure lots of different plants in a small place. So who are we? So the Australian Seed Bank Partnership is an amazing collaboration of 10 conservation seed banks around Australia that are shown on the map here. We also now have a new entrant, the Australian Pastures Gene Bank, based in South Australia, and the Australian Grains Gene Bank is also part of our partnership, looking after our crop and native pasture diversity. Our key global partner, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the history in a minute, is obviously the Millennium Seed Bank Q. They also celebrated their 25th anniversary last year. Hopefully you saw some of the material around that, Kate Blanchett's little docos. We'll talk a bit about Kate later. The Australian Network for Plant Conservation, now known as Plant Conservation Australia, the PEAK NGO, is part of our network, as is Greening Australia as sort of the National Restoration Institution. So what do? So we secure seeds and plant material primarily to provide that insurance against loss in the wild, but also the genetic material we need to do research, whether that's plant recovery, whether that's understanding genetic diversity. And in the last couple of years, we've been particularly focused on issues relating to adaptations to disease like myrtle rust and also climate change. Understanding those traits, and some of our partners will talk about that later on, are critical to how we recover plants and also landscapes. Now, what you're really going to hear about today is knowledge sharing. I'm actually not going to talk too much about that because all of the people here on the screen will talk about what they're doing in that knowledge space. Gemma and Meg will talk about some of the science collaborations. Dan will talk about some of the knowledge collaborations with traditional owners as well in the desert, with the desert mobs. Now, the other thing we do is make our data available. Dave is going to talk a bit about our Australian Virtual Seed Bank portal. This is where all our collection data is stored and is publicly available. It's on the ALL platform, so anyone can have access to that data. We're about to go through a refresh for this current year, which will pull in all the collections that have been processed in the last 12 months. Really important sort of resource for people, whether they're restoration practitioners, whether they're research scientists, to know what we hold. There's also a lot of germination data in there, which gives people, the cues for how they propagate plants. We've also, another couple of things we've done that I'm just going to mention before we briefly touch on our history and move to our speakers. We've also developed national guidelines. The germplasm guidelines were done with a consortium of some of our partners, and they are available online. We'll put some of those links in the chat, both to the portal and to the guidelines. These are practical tools for people working in this space. How do you source seeds? How do you collect them? How do you process them? How do you use them? So quickly to our history, here's a bit of a snapshot. There was a little bit of seed banking happening in Australia before 2000. Obviously, the project that Q led, the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership, which was about banking 10% of the world's seed banking flora, enabled a lot of activity to happen in Australia, and that's when Tom was kind of convening and looking after the Australian Seed and Conservation Network. It's worth noting that Australia, we actually exceeded that target in that period in terms of the number of things we collected. Once the partnership kicked off in, shown there was 2010, it's 2011, the 1,000 Species Project was to try and secure 1,000 species in that first decade of ASBP. We actually once again secured 1,400 species. So, our partners are kind of overachieving across all of these early projects. Now, we've got the bushfire recovery projects, so we don't need to sort of revisit the, the extent and the devastation of those fires. but largely through a whole lot of work. I mentioned Rachel to actually identify some of the priority species that needed to be surveyed, collected, potentially translocated post-fire. We were able to mobilise our network really quickly. COVID and other things impacted, but I think Nathan's going to talk later about some of the, I suppose, the flow on from that bushfire work and how we're preparing for those sort of events in the future. So in the last period of time, and Annalisa will touch on this in a minute, we have been focused on threatened species and assisting the Australian Government to implement the Threatened Species Action Plan. And I'll leave Annalisa to talk about that. Now, conservation, as we all know, thrives on collaboration. That's the essence of our partnership. And I'm really excited now to hand over to our speakers to actually provide some of the beautiful detail about the projects that we're involved in. So Fiona Fraser was meant to be speaking today. Fiona, as you'd be aware, Threatened Species Commissioner, she's been an Australian Government spokesman around the bird flu and has been involved in the working party on that. So she is unable to attend today. She sends her apologies. But Annalisa Hayes, who I've worked with for a long time, works in the Office of Threatened Species Commissioners team. Annalisa is actually our contact of plants and plant conservation and has been doing a lot of the communications that you might see that comes through Fiona's site around some of the plant conservation projects over in Australia. So welcome, Annalisa, and I will just stop sharing.
Thanks, Kathy. And I just wanted to reiterate Fiona's apologies for not being here today. She was genuinely really disappointed. And even this morning, she thought perhaps I can make it, but in the end, just couldn't. So on her behalf, I want to say congratulations on 15 years of being an absolutely critical part of Australia's threatened species community. This is a community that's dedicated to ensuring our native plants and animals have a more secure future. And without a doubt, your partnership has made a difference to conserving plant diversity overall and boosted the recovery prospects for countless threatened plant species. And the importance of the partnership's role was highlighted last year when Australia's National Climate Risk Assessment warned that with 3 degrees of global warming, 40 to 70% of native plant species will be exposed to climatic conditions they do not currently experience. A sobering report indeed. And while we work to build the resilience of plants to our changing climate, it's great to know that we've got the long-term conservation insurance through seed banking. Here in the Australian Government at DQ since 2022, we've been taking action to meet the ambitious targets in our Threatened Species Action Plan with the knowledge that threatened plants already have your highly effective partnership in their corner. Oh, now I can't advance the slide. Hang on. Has it gone on to the next slide? No.
You're still on the first slide, I'm afraid.
Oh, why? Oh, hang on. Here's a little button. Got it. Okay. So the threatened species. Oh, no, too many. My mouse was a bit frisky. The Threatened Species Action Plan is guiding the Australian Government's approach to meeting its commitment to no new extinctions. For our threatened plant species, the seed safety net provided by the Australian Seed Bank Partnership is a big part of reducing their extinction risk and supporting future restoration. So the action plan guides the Saving Native Species program, which has funded 2 successful projects led by the partnership. These projects have made important contributions to safeguarding threatened plants that are facing unrelenting impacts, as we all know, from habitat change, weeds, disease, amongst other threats. And I hope you all caught the great budget news last month that the Saving Native Species program has been extended for a further 2 years. And will continue to support species-specific and landscape-scale action for recovering our threatened species and important natural areas. So I'd like to give a shout out first of all to the Myrtle May Day project, led by the partnership and funded by the Saving Native Species program. So as you're probably aware, myrtle rust continues to threaten native Myrtaceae species with no feasible landscape scale cure. So this project that many of you have probably been involved in delivering, focused on securing seed and germplasm collections as an insurance policy for species that may continue to decline in the wild. And from our point of view, it was great in directly contributing to Target 14 in the action plan that seeks to secure all nationally listed threatened plant species affected by myrtle rust in insurance collections. The project was a masterclass in collaboration, bringing together conservation seed banks, botanic gardens, government agencies, landholders, First Nation partners, and community conservation groups across multiple states. So Myrtle May Day really showed how coordinated national action can turn an urgent threat response into practical, lasting conservation outcomes. And thank you to all the partners in the project who are online today. The other successful Saving Native Species project was Securing the Future. This project has strengthened conservation outcomes for 10 of the 30 priority plants in the Threatened Species Action Plan. Again, its success was down to partnerships that will continue to build on those conservation outcomes and build capacity to protect those threatened plants into the future. So one of Fiona's key roles as the Threatened Species Commissioner is to bring together action, research and partnerships to prevent the extinction of native plants and animals. So, we consider it perfectly aligned with your role as the partnership in the conservation of our precious plants that brings together seed banking, science and collaboration. So I think we're in furious agreement that conservation efforts are stronger together. So on behalf of Fiona, thank you all for contributing your collective wealth of knowledge and expertise embedded in the partnership to the conservation of Australia's native and threatened plants. We couldn't do it without you.
Thanks so much, Annalisa. And yeah, we'll send a little vote thanks to Fiona as well. It's been a big support. And we look forward to talking to you about the next phase of saving native species and what we might be able to help you with. Okay, so now we're going to turn to Dr. David Merritt. Dave's just stepped back as being our Chair of National Steering Committee. And sorry, I've got my Erin's just giving me instructions. Has just stepped back from being Chair of National Steering Committee last year, and we want to extend our thanks for his direction for the program over that time. Dave is the program leader of Kings Park Science, and I think you and Dan are probably some of the longest members of the partnership online. So welcome, Dave. And Dave's going to be talking about their seed longevity research and also a little bit about our seed portal. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kathy. Yeah, it's great certainly to be here to help celebrate ASBP's 15th anniversary. And I'd like to present a few highlights from our perspective here in Western Australia and Kings Park about the involvement over the past 15 years in the partnership, and starting with some of the collaborative research that we commenced really in, I think, the formative stages of the Australian Seed Bank partnership, and trying to answer questions that we continue to focus on today, which is really understanding how long seeds live for in storage, how we can preserve them for the long time. And some of the research that we started as a partnership back in, as I say, the formative stages, 2008, 9, 10, was really around studying and modelling seed longevity, and the collaborative work that we started and published in 2014 was focused on studying the seed longevity across Australia, and we published data on over 170 species. And this approach was really to build up some foundational knowledge about seed longevity and what types of seeds are relatively longer or shorter lived. And we studied plant and seed traits and environmental traits as well. So we were able to demonstrate the types of seeds that are, for example, longer lived, tend to be from warmer environments, tend to be serotinous species as opposed to those that shed their seeds into the soil, tend to be seeds with larger embryos, these kinds of things. So, you know, these patterns help us to identify broad approaches, broad trends in seed longevity. The modelling does have some limitations in terms of them not being perfect predictors for seed longevity of individual collections or how long they might live in our seed banks, but it does provide the foundational knowledge regarding the relatively longer or shorter lived seeds, particularly when we're coming off a low knowledge base for the diversity of species that we have in Australia. And this work continues in many forms today across the partnership. So whilst we started with 2 or 3 partners in Western Australia, South Australia and New South Wales in particular, now really we can see it across all parts of Australia. And so I think you know, that's a great place to start. Seed banking's come a long way from the jars in shelves. The picture I have here, the seeds in jars on the shelf like our seed bank was in the 1960s. And it's one of the key advantages of the partnership is to work together to address these, you know, complex scientific challenges. I also wanted to highlight some of the on-ground work that the Australian Seed Bank Partnership has been able to support. One of the great programs that we're involved in at Kings Park and across the partnership was the Rare Bloom project. So this was a 3-year partnership between WWF, Australia, Botanica Bio Week and the Australian Seed Bank Partnership. It involved 8 partners across 7 states and territories and targeted the conservation of 120 Australian plant species. So here at Kings Park, we focused in particular on some recovery actions around one of our most threatened orchid species, Caladinia busselliana. So that's Bussel's spider orchid. And this work led by Belinda Davis, who you can see in the centre picture there, leading some of the translocation programs. This work has been key to supporting the recovery of this species. So Bussel's spider orchid was down to just around 12 or 13 individuals in 4 populations. And what the Rare Bloom project allowed us to do is to really put an additional focus on this species. We were able to retrieve seeds that have been placed into cryo storage, so storage in liquid nitrogen in the 1990s. These seeds were from plants of a population that's no longer extant in the wild. So it was very important additional genetic diversity that we're able to add. And the Rare Bloom project also supported some pollinator surveys. So to be able to translocate orchids, we need to be confident that the pollinators are there so that the plants will be successful in the wild. And to grow those plants up, and you can see a social media post there of some of the plants in our glasshouse here at Kings Park. And I think this was perhaps one of the more popular ASBP posts in terms of likes. It's nothing like orchids to draw a crowd, but it was, you know, great to be able to highlight the work. And where that's led to, under the Rare Bloom project, 216 plants were translocated into 3 new sites where pollinators were available, and we've continued that work today. And there's now more than 770 plants have been translocated into the wild. So I think that's a great success story and a great example of the on-ground work that the ASBP is able to support. And as Kathy mentioned in the intro, I just wanted to finish by talking a little bit about the Australian Virtual Seed Bank. So I think this is one of our flagship achievements as a partnership. We launched it in October 2023 with the Atlas of Living Australia, and it provides the publicly accessible online portal for all the data of the collections across the partnership. So it aggregates data from 10 conservation seed banks, all of the data that's built up over many decades, and allows us to support our research, conservation, planning, land management activities. And the important thing is that this work continues. The platform's continually improving and being updated every year as we improve the type and scope, breadth of data that we add to the portal. A new tool this year was a spatial search functionality that allows you to define polygons and determine the collections within a specific area. And again, as Kathy mentioned, we're about to update this again to capture the collections data from the previous year. So I think this initiative really highlights the power of the collaborative and coordinated approach that the Australian Seed Bank partnership takes, and our key goal to make data more accessible, usable and impactful for all users of native seed in Australia. And I'd just add, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the Australian Virtual Seed Bank, there's a great webinar on the ASBP website, the PlantChat Webinar 5. So if you navigate to ASBP website, you'll find the PlantChats, and you can hear all about the portal from Jack Brinkman, who's from the AEST Living Australia and one of our key supporters in building the platform. So thanks very much. I'll leave it there and pass on to the next speaker. I'll just, if I can.
Thanks, Dave. That was amazing.
Yep, stop sharing my screen now. Yep.
A big shout out to Jack, Tanya and Andrew from ALA. They are like amazing to work with, and Jack just loves our portal. So he goes over and above to improve the functionality of it. I'd love to talk about what Dave's just spoken about, but I want to get on to the next because that was a lovely, Dave, just to show where we've come from bottles. I think that's what I've still got at home, through to, the sophisticated science that we're doing now. It's unlocking all those puzzles. Now I'd love to move on to Dan Duval. He's actually in Tassie today. He's not in his home state of South Australia. Dan is the Senior Seed Collection Officer at the SAC Conservation Centre. Again, one of our very long-term partners. It's been around for a long time. Dan,
thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, well, wait till I see that picture of you. And Dan's particularly going to focus on their work in the arid parts of South Australia and the evolving relationships and partnerships with traditional owners. Thanks, Dan.
Sure. You can see that?
Perfect.
See that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. No worries. Greetings, everyone. Yep, I'm Dan and I work for the Botanic Gardens State Herbarium in South Australia. Yep, I've been around for about 21, 22 years in the program. Many thanks to ASBP. Congratulations on the 15th anniversary. I was reflecting on the huge amount of work that's been done as part of the partnership with collections, the germination research, a lot of the knowledge sharing that's gone on in conferences and workshops. And a lot of the utilisation of those collections today that's been achieved with projects with ASBP over the years. One thing that came to mind is today we are actually lodging applications or grant applications through ASBP. ASBP is the main partner within state, and that better supports what we do. And one of the grant applications we did with ASBP and Kathy and her team was to submit one for some working with the Adnyamathanha people in the Northern Flinders Ranges. It's hard to get support sometimes in regions to do this sort of work, so it's good to have an ASBP partner to do that. And that reminded me really of some work we did years ago that would not have been possible without the support of ASBP. And that was in the Great Victoria Desert. Oops. Where we're actually working on the Marralinga Jarrajarra lands. And so that meant we actually got to work with people on the land. So we actually delivered and presentations to the Marralinga Jarrajarra elders. And they were actually quite supportive and invited us back. So we actually ended up to a couple of trips to the region in 2014. So this is an area called the Mumungari Conservation Park, and it's co-managed by the Marralinga Jarrajarra Management Board and the Department of Environment and Water, which I work for. The ability to do this was actually supported by ASBP through the Duval Foundation and the Global Trees Project. So you can see in a photo there, we actually spent a bit of time with people in the community from Oak Valley. They came out for a few days. it was really, we were sharing knowledge about some of the plant species we were looking for, but at the same time we were learning a lot of the Anangu names for some of these species, and certainly something about their use. I was going to say is it's really that you can get out there, but out of those 2 fieldwork trips, a lot of things were achieved apart from seed collections and seed banking. So we collected over 200 scientific specimens during that fieldwork. For a lot of this is a region where it's got a lack of collections. There's a lack of data. A lot of these species are represented by 1 or 2 collections only. It's partly because it's a fairly remote area and hard to access. But we ended up with over 200 scientific specimens, and we actually banked seed collections for over 100 species. A number of these were new records for South Australia. So I've got an example in the bottom photo of Andy Rashid, his professional photography, came along as a volunteer. And you can see how he is happy, is collecting this Eremophila. This is Eremophila undulata that we'd never recorded in South Australia. He's happy to get some seeds in the bag there. This is something that's actually rated in WA that we didn't know occurred. And the above photos is a Tylotus chemiclatus that we didn't know we had in South Australia. There's also a sclerolena called a rotioides that we never knew we had. But there were multiple collections that were new for South Australia, multiple collections that we had little data for. Like I said, many of these species were data deficient, not only in terms of the number of collections, but also ecological data. So we had little knowledge about population size, the extent of distribution, or the ecological niche. One of the great things was to get photos of all these plant species as well and share them on our website, Plants of South Australia. So the GVD is quite unique. There's a lot of endemism in that region. So not surprising, a lot of the collections that we made in that region over the 2 field trips were new to our seed bank. An example there is the Swainsona with the purple fleas there. That's called Swainsona unifoliata. We only had collections from a single locality in South Australia, and it's in a gypsum spring or mound spring called Waldana Well. This is the first time we'd seen this, but at least we got an understanding of this and other species that they were specific gypsophiles, and that's why they were quite localised. Other examples there in the top right is Pterodia loricata. That's a Western Australian species we didn't know we have. The bottom right photo is a endemic that's listed as vulnerable to South Australia. It's only known for about 4 or 5 records. All these species were actually able to get specimen collections from and get seeds banked, and there's germination data for them as well. But it certainly improved our knowledge of the niche for these species, even flowering, population sizes, and the extent of distribution. So the project really highlighted the benefits of seed banking that go well beyond the seed bank itself. So congratulations to the ASPP. The significance to our program in terms of that support over the years, goes well beyond seed banking itself. Thank you.
So when was that photo taken, Dan? When you look
2000.
Yeah, the Harrison Ford. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, 2014.
Some amazing messages there about, and I sort of thought, if you don't go, you don't know. And that's the thing about the work that we fund allows our collectors to be out in the region, and the demonstration of the new species known in South Australia and the new knowledge about their habitats is just so critical. Thanks, Dave. God, I can't even talk today. Thanks, Dan. Now we're going to move on to Dr. Gemma Hoyle. Gemma is a research scientist at the National Seed Bank. Gemma's been doing a lot of really fascinating work. She's going to talk about some of the collaborations, but also sort of elevated up to look at how we collaborate at a national level. So thank you, Gemma.
Thanks, Kathy. I think Erin's going to share my slides. Yeah, thanks, Erin. All right. Hello, everyone. Great to be here and to help celebrate the ASBP. Happy birthday. I thought I'd talk, as Kathy said, about research collaboration across partners and share a couple of projects that the National Seed Bank has been involved in. So why does collaboration across partners matter? Number one, it matters for a lot of reasons, but here at the National Seed Bank, we sit within Parks Australia. So we aim to support conservation Australia-wide. The partnership has meant that we're able to work with other seed scientists and other seed banks and achieve those outcomes beyond the ACT where we sit. Number two, what does the collaboration look like? It's about sharing. We share seeds, we share fieldwork, equipment and expertise, data, the analysis of the data. We share protocols. We also share the responsibility for the research outcomes. And we share dinner and drinks whenever we get the chance. Number three, what it enables. Collaboration enables us to generate larger, more representative data sets. We get to solve problems faster working together. We can test broader ecological and seed banking questions together. We can share our facilities, use equipment that we don't necessarily have ourselves. And we can capture greater variation within and between species and collections than we would otherwise. Number four, the outcomes when we work together. They often include broad-scale conservation and understanding, improved protocols as we go along, wider comms across multiple social media platforms that we all have, publications, hopefully, and collaborative ideas for next steps as well usually arise from working together. And why does it work? Well, it works because we have shared goals across our seed banks, and we also have relationships and trust that we've built over time. We can openly share our data with each other. We have agreed protocols that we already use, and we're on the same conference circuit quite often, so we can support one another with presentations and posters and things. And we share supportive national frameworks such as the ASBP. Next slide, please, Erin. Thank you. All right, so a couple of examples where I think through collaboration, a simple study has really grown in depth and scope, and we've been able to explore a much broader set of questions than we would have. The first example is our collaboration with James Wood at the Tasmanian Seed Conservation Centre. So that's James there at the top with Fiona Hay. And the three of us used to work together at Kew's Millennium Seed Bank a long, long time ago. This work came about because I was having trouble germinating Leonema and Fabalium seeds that we collected here in the ACT after the Black Summer bushfires. In my defence, Rutaceae seeds are notoriously difficult to germinate. I got on the phone to James, and he had had some success, of course, germinating Leonema montanum, which is endemic to Tasmania. And so James shared his wisdom and he shared his seeds with me, and together we investigated germination and dormancy of all three Rutaceae species. And then James presented findings at the Seed Science Conference in Horsham last year, which was exciting. And you can see there in the figure, bottom left, that James is still winning the Rutaceae germination race. But I was pretty proud of my 20% germination at the end of that. This work helped to leverage funding for us to recruit another James Perkins, to work exclusively on Rutaceae germination for 2 years. And that's who you can see in the bottom right-hand corner there. So thanks to the initial partner collaboration, this work continues and another seed scientist has been recruited, hopefully. Next slide, please. This is my last example. This is Team Viola. So this collaboration came about when Rebecca Miller at the Victorian Conservation Seed Bank heard that we were working to conserve the endangered Viola impressera after the bushfires. And then Hong Zhang and Meg Hirst joined us, and the Team Viola group chat was born. So we were interested in Viola germination strategies and dormancy. And to cut a long story short, one Viola species turned into 9 species, 3 collections turned into 14. And then more recently, 2 seed banks turned into 3 when Karen Somerville from PlantBank joined us to help us investigate seed storage behaviour of Violas as well. So this work is also still underway, but results have already provided several previously unreported insights into the weird and wonderful germination strategies of Australian violas across southeastern Australia. So for me, these examples show the value of seed banks staying connected and working collaboratively across the partnership. And I really hope that that continues for many more years to come, because it's honestly my favourite way of working. Thanks, guys.
Amen, Gemma. You've warmed my social science heart there. And I think what Gemma's shown is just the leverage, both the knowledge, but also being able to attract future funding through our science and the impact of our science. This is a nice segue to Dr. Megan Hirst, or Meg as we know her. And Meg's here from the Victorian Conservation Seed Bank. Probably going to build on some of Gemma's stories, I'd imagine, Meg. And yes. I'll hand over to you now. Thanks, Meg.
Hello. I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the traditional owners of the land I'm on today, and acknowledge the First Peoples knowledge systems, recognising that the Western system of botany isn't the only way of knowing and understanding plants, algae and fungi. Over the past 15 years, the Australian Seed Bank Partnership's been fundamental to plant conservation in Australia. And it's not just about collecting and storing seed, it's about building a coordinated and collaborative network that ensures that these collections are accessible, useful and enduring. And at the Victorian Conservation Seed Bank, that means we're part of something bigger, sharing knowledge and methods and challenges across institutions. So currently our seed bank holds 50% of Victorian flora, and 52% of those are federally or state listed species that are at risk. So what makes this partnership powerful is that it connects the collections with the science and action. It allows us to move beyond storing seeds to understanding how species persist and how we can actively support their recovery in the wild. And just what you're looking at here is the team in action, and just some lovely images that have been captured there by Daniel White and Bob Hare, who I'm hoping Bob Hare is here today, our long-term volunteer in the seed bank. Our research aligns with our broader science strategy, so we're focusing on climate impacts in vulnerable systems like the Victorian Alps. With the warming and extreme events, they're expected to reduce biodiversity and ecosystem function, with additional pressures from weeds and feral herbivores, and of course us, human activity. So we're working towards seed-based restoration, but success is constrained by high failure rates in germination and seedling establishment under these harsh alpine microclimates. So germination, which is temperature sensitive, and warming threatens both the population persistence and colonisation. So we need targeted research on the recruitment niches and germination requirements. So that's critical. So encouragingly, from the work that we're doing, we've seen that many of the common occurring species have shown a wide thermal germination niche, suggesting that resilience under climate and under current and future climate scenarios. There really is some quite some good stories there. For example, what you're looking at here is the Leucochrysum alpinum, and it has a very broad germination niche that we found. This is a summit species. It occurs right on the top of Mount Nels. And so we were testing these germinating across a broad temperature range, and with Leucochrysum albicans, it has a consistently high success, which also aligned with the snow-free growing period, and that is up there in the Alps, which is quite shortened. So we discovered that the optimal sowing time is likely mid-spring, when temperatures rise and soil moisture remains high from snowmelt. And this work directly informs restoration practice, improving seed use and guiding species recovery and strengthening adaptation strategies. But what's exciting is that this work is deeply collaborative. And through the partnership, we compare results across species, regions and institutions, as Gemma has said, and building a far stronger evidence base than any one organisation could do alone. So what we're doing now in collaboration is we're focusing, here's one project, we're focusing on alpine systems, where we're jointly investigating dormancy and thermal germination responses in 3 alpine endemics. And we're broadly asking how will reduced snow affect plant recruitment. So this includes assessing seed quality, viability, diagnosing dormancy, testing dormancy breaking treatments, and refining thermal germination niches. And what this does, it translates, so translating into science these practical protocols, and this is what you need, strong collaboration to deliver this, particularly for clear guidance for on-ground practitioners. So looking ahead, as alpine systems change rapidly, we need a coordinated, evidence-based conservation, and that is critical. And this partnership is what provides the foundation to meet that challenge together. So I love this picture. We're all out there up on Cosy. This was in the summer of this year, and we're all scattered about collecting seed. Up the top there, there's a handful of us just before we started, big smiley faces, and some lovely images there from Danny White, which is the 3 species that we're actually working on. And top corner, the lovely Gemma and Pip with the thermogradient plate up in Canberra. So this is becoming a very exciting project. So watch out. Thank you and happy birthday. And I will stop sharing.
Oh, thanks so much, Meg. I think you beautifully demonstrated the workflow from seed collection to science to recovery, and that underlying theme of our partnership around collaboration. So thank you. Beautiful segue from Gemma's. Yeah. Last but not least, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Nathan Emery. Nathan is the manager of SeedBank, PlantBank in New South Wales and the Conservation Collections. Nathan is also our chair of our steering committee and led the data analysis work on our collection review, which was looking at what we hold as a national network and what was collected from 2000 to 2020. So Nathan will also give us a bit of a peek into our future, what we're looking to do in the next 5 and 15 years. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Can I just start by saying happy birthday to the ASBP. May there be many more fruitful years to come. Haha, I got the pun in. I'll stop now. I'm presenting, I guess, with two caps on. And first, I'm going to have my PlantBank and Botanic Gardens of Sydney capped to talk about some of the wonderful collaborative projects we've been involved in with the ASBP. Before, as Kathy mentioned, I will don my ASBP steering committee chair cap to talk about the collections review. So firstly, I wanted to talk about how we've been able to improve the conservation readiness of New South Wales flora following the devastating impacts of the Black Summer bushfires in 2019 and 2020. And there are a number of projects that were involved, that we were involved in targeting and prioritizing species that have been impacted by these bushfires. So over a 2 to 3 year period, we managed to collect nearly 120 collections across the state, primarily focusing on some of our most spectacular Sydney sandstone flora, including, you can see there, Darwinia taxifolia subspecies Macrolina, the swamp honey myrtle Melaleuca squamea, and the ever Instagrammable and influencer attracting pink flannel flower Actinotus forsythii. And notably, this comprised over 100 species that were successfully collected. Notably, 17 of these species were actually new to our seed bank collection. So these are species that weren't represented in the seed bank. And these included some really specky species, including Epacris sprangilioides from the swamps up in the Blue Mountains region, and the red spiderflower Grevillea speciosa, which is quite an iconic wildflower in the Sydney sandstone region. We were also able to conduct a considerable number of germination trials on these species and really try to hone down on developing germination protocols and understanding the requirements that these species need in order to successfully germinate. And we were able to look quite closely at some species. For example, the top species I have here is Gardenia glomerata, and we looked at the thermal niche of this species using a bidirectional thermogradient plate, which allows us to expose the seeds to a whole range of temperature treatments, constant temperatures, alternating temperatures from 5 degrees all the way up to 40, even 50 degrees Celsius. And we can identify hotspots in these temperature profiles where germination is at its highest. And this is really useful information to discover and provide, because not only does it help us to identify the conditions to maximize germination when we repeat these experiments in the lab, but it also gives us some linkages with where we may expect recruitment to be in the wild. So if we map these hotspots with the local site temperatures for this species, we find that it's quite closely associated with spring and autumn conditions at that local site. And we can also provide this information to nurseries in terms of the timing for seed sowing during the year. So really important information. We also conducted pre-treatment testing on a number of species, primarily with gibberellic acid, which is a germination stimulant, and smoke water to look at the post-fire germination responses. And we saw a raft of different responses amongst the species. Actinidis forsythii in particular, we saw quite a significant additive effect of having both gibberellic acid and smoke water in increasing its germination. And indeed, this species is notable as well because we were fortunate through these projects to be able to have the opportunity to make such significant collections across its New South Wales distribution, and the fact that we know that it's a fire ephemeral, so we don't get germination without adding smoke to it, that we now use these collections for our annual smoke water assay at PlantBank. So this is understanding the efficacy of our smoke water concentration, knowing where the optimal dilution is, and being able to use that information then to be able to apply smoke water as a treatment for other research opportunities and projects at PlantBank. So a really nice legacy for that, that species in those collections that we made. We also undertook 2 living collection plantings as part of the Rare Blooms project at the Australian Botanic Garden, Mount Annan. We planted out a number of pink flannelflower plants, as well as oak-leaved Illyria, with staff from WWF and Botanica involved. And this was a terrific opportunity for us and our wonderful horticulture staff to engage in our partners and our stakeholders and share in the important conservation work that's happening both in the state, but also more broadly through the Australian Seed Bank partnership. Okay, so I'm going to don my ASBP steering committee hat and shift gears to talk about the recently completed collections, ASBP collections review. So this was an opportunity for us to look back and take stock on the amazing efforts across the partnership, seed banking efforts across the partnership during the 2-decade period from 2000 to 2020, and also use it as an opportunity to look at future directions, future priorities for the partnership for the short term and long term. The aim of the review was to look at the representativeness and the functionality of our collections during that time frame. And I'm pleased to say our efforts were essentially world leading in terms of plant conservation at a continental scale. More than 31,000 collections were made during this 2-decade period, which represents nearly 200 of Australia's plant families. There was a considerably high consistency in collection effort and the taxonomic representation across the 10 conservation seed banks that provided data for this review. And we also saw really strong evidence of dedicated seed science and research outcomes that are support or have support and continue to support current and future conservation actions, particularly around things like understanding seed biology and seed storage behavior. And at a global scale, this work represents a significant contribution to global plant conservation efforts. More than 11,000 collections were duplicated to the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership over this time, representing nearly 9,000 taxa, which is the highest number of species provided to the MSBP of any country in the world. We also had a strong focus on threatened species as a primary source of funding, and 50% of federally listed species were collected during this 2-decade period, which is a significant contribution to the Target 8 of the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation in 2020, which aimed to secure 75% of threatened species in the country of origin. There were quite a number of recommendations and priorities that have come out of this review, and I'm only going to talk about some of the key directions and focus points for the partnership moving forward that have come out of this review. There's a clear need to avoid any fragmented seed banking practices and move towards more consistent national standards that align with global best practice. Central to this shift is the recognition that data underpins every stage of the workflows and processes that we undertake, from initial collection through to viability testing to the eventual end use of those collections and the duplication of those collections as a risk management strategy. And this data must be treated as the backbone of the system. And there is substantial legacy data that already exists, but a lot of it currently is unavailable, so it remains underutilized. This means that digitization of our existing and future data is a high value, but also a low cost opportunity to unlock significant gains in conservation seed banking and the research that we undertake. Indeed, citizen science also offers a powerful potential mechanism to accelerate this data transcription and georeferencing at scale. And we've seen the terrific outcomes of programs such as Duval for achieving these sorts of things. At the same time, we need to sort of move away from the sometimes unfortunate external perception that conservation seed banking is sort of a bank and forget or a stamp collecting exercise, and actually push and acknowledge the utility and the important contributions that seed banks provide in achieving applied conservation outcomes. Indeed, our collections are not static, nor are they dead. They're very much alive and are living collections. And this viability of our collection declines over time, making ongoing testing essential to maintain the utility of those collections. Our collections are very active, with hundreds of requests for a variety of reasons happening every single year. And we need to make sure that we are providing as much knowledge and the highest quality collections that we can in order to support those outcomes. And so curation and retesting need to be actioned, resourced, and given the appropriate capacity. Notwithstanding that a proportion of our flora also do not tolerate our standard orthodox storage procedures of drying and freezing, and understanding how best to conserve these species is a key future challenge for the partnership. And because species differ in their seed longevity and sometimes unpredictably, a risk-based approach to retesting intervals is required, and being able to continue the great work that Dave talked about in distinguishing between long-lived and short-lived taxa in storage. So we have a really strong foundation of Australia flora that's secured across our partnership, and strategic prioritisation to fill some of those gaps and complete the representation of those collections is needed. Looking at these at a variety of scales, such as focusing on underrepresented bioregions, undersampled bioregions, the communities that occur within these regions, the taxa that make up these communities, and the genetic diversity that are found within our taxas in our species distributions. We've had a lot of focus on threatened species, and this will continue into the future, but we also need to broaden our scope into ecological communities, as we cannot preserve and manage our threatened species effectively in the wild without conserving and managing the communities that they occur in. Climate readiness is also an important consideration in our focus, as well as identifying species that are high priority for restoration projects in the future. We've seen today that we have a really strong collaboration and capacity within our partnership, and this underscores the importance of the ASBP. Our efforts are constrained ultimately by limitations in infrastructure and people, and in the absence of being able to upscale these, we need to really focus on the benefits of collaboration and the outcomes that they produce. Success will really depend on targeted efforts that are combined with shared capabilities across the network, and I'm really excited to be able to see and be part of the next 15 years of the Australian Seed Bank partnership.
Thank you, Nathan. And I think Nathan's given us a beautiful picture of where we come from and where we're going, as well as that beautiful vignette about the success of their bushfire projects in New South Wales. Now, I think we'll all agree that that was quite a perfect suite of vignettes about the diversity of work that's happening across the partnership, the power of our collaboration, and most importantly, the impact for plant conservation. Seed bankers truly are what would I call them, the silent, or not silent, quiet achievers of the conservation world. They are quite silent too compared to those wildlife ecologists. Is that sharing now? Yeah, okay. Okay. I'm just trying to move this through. I'm going to move it through, Aaron. I just want to do a bit of a shout out to James and Andrew, who are online. So from Tasmania, and Andrew Crawford from over in Western Australia. So can everyone see that picture? That's James in a very remote part of southwest Tasmania, doing some collecting. Sort of mirrors some of those alpine scenes that Gemma and Meg showed us. And I think Andrew gets to go to some of the most spectacular spots. This is Mount Surprise, and I hope he did find many surprises down in his collecting work in Stirling Range. And we're about to head back to the centre and do some collecting at the most amazing Watarka National Park, which is got so many rare and threatened plants and so many opportunities for future arid research, recovery work, and relationships with TOs. I'm just going to send this final message from, I call her our Kate. I know she was the ambassador for Q, but she is and always will be an Aussie. We were pretty rapt to actually, through Q, secure her support for our anniversary. Life begins with seeds, and so does our best chance to say it. So, yeah, amen. Finally, what can you do in this space? Well, we do have our Banking the Bush campaign running. Follow us on social media. I don't think there's a better pun merchant than Brad Desmond, although Nathan got one in. And spread awareness about how cool seeds are and how cool seed bankers are. So thank you for staying with us, all of the people online. We've still got 72 people online. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to our partners. And yes, we look forward to the future, the next 15 years and beyond.